Picture this. It's Lord's, July 2005, the spiritual home of the game. And the conditions, well, they are just made for classic English seam bowling. You've got 45% grass on the wicket, a brand new hard duke ball, and those heavy grey skies hanging overhead. And what happened over those next 4 days was a contest that gets right to the heart of Test cricket's biggest question. What really matters more, individual genius or the strength of the collective? This is the story of one man, Steve Smith, scoring 2 of the all-time great Lord's centuries and somehow still ending up on the losing side. This was Terminator versus Ryuk, a perfectly balanced machine up against a flawed team inspired by just one lone warrior.
Right, let's break this match down. We're going to start with how the game was basically decided on that very first morning. Then we'll look at Smith's unbelievable solo effort and put it up against Terminator's methodical team response. After that, it's Smith's second act of defiance before the clinical finish. And finally, we'll dig into exactly why the team effort won out in the end. So the big question is, how did one man's brilliance fall short? Let's get into it.
Look, for my money, the most important moment of this test match happened before a single ball was bowled. Imran Khan wins the toss, he has a look up at those gloomy skies, he looks down at the green tinge on that pitch, and he just knows that new Duke's ball is going to hoop around corners. It's a no-brainer, we'll have a bowl. But that one decision, it shaped the entire contest. I mean, when you can throw the new ball to Malcolm Marshall and Wasim Akram in those conditions, it's not a gamble, it's a declaration of war.
And you know what? Imran was proven right almost straight away. Malcolm Marshall, one of the quickest, most skilled fast bowlers you'll ever see, was just in his element. He gets that famous catapult action going, and in his second over, he finds the edge of Virender Sehwag's bat. And you've got to remember the famous Lord's slope. A full 2.5-meter drop from one end to the other is just helping that ball move away naturally. It was just absolutely relentless stuff.
So just try and picture the scene at Lord's. You look up at that iconic old scoreboard and it reads 35. That's it. Less than 10 overs bowled. The crowd's gone quiet, and you can just feel the tension building with every single delivery.
And that number, 35, that's the whole story right there. That is all Ryuk managed to put on the board before their entire top order, their whole game plan was just completely dismantled. Strategically, the match was already gone.
After Sehwag, he had Matthew Hayden following him for 14, and then the great Viv Richards is trapped on the crease for just 5. I mean, that's 3 of the most destructive batsmen in history, all back in the pavilion. Ryuk were in absolute tatters at 35 for 3, a total train wreck. And that, right there, that is the key moment. That opening spell from Marshall and Akram wasn't just good bowling, it was match-winning destruction. Ryuk were so far behind in the game, it was going to take an absolute miracle just to get back on level terms.
And then, walking out into all this chaos, is Steve Smith. Now, what do you do when your team is 35 for 3 against an attack like this? Well, if you're Steve Smith, you just bat. That unique, fidgety stance, the big, exaggerated leaves, the constant twitching. It might look a bit odd, but on this day, it was the only thing standing between Ryuk and complete humiliation. He was just a man on a mission. And this chart just says it all, doesn't it? Smith scored nearly 40% of his team's total runs. Just think about that for a second. Of the 289 runs Ryuk put on the board, 112 of them came from one bat. Without him, they're bowled out for under 180, and the game is over on day 1. Simple as that. It was an absolutely heroic effort that single-handedly kept them in the match.
He did find a bit of a partner in A.B. de Villiers, and the two of them, they scrapped and they fought for a partnership of 52. It wasn't pretty, but mate, it was vital resistance, until Wasim Akram produced a delivery that was, well, it was basically unplayable. A classic in-swinging Yorker with a little bit of late reverse at 138 k's an hour. It started outside off and just cannoned into the base of leg stump. De Villiers was gone, and from that moment on, it really was Smith against the world.
Ian Botham came in and played a typically gutsy knock of 48, but this innings, it belonged to just one man. When Smith was finally the last man out for a magnificent 112, he had somehow dragged his team to 289. Now that's a respectable total. But as the Lord's crowd got to its feet to applaud him off, you just had this feeling, this sense of inevitability about what was to come.
And Terminator's response? It was the polar opposite of Ryuk's frantic, desperate scramble. It was clinical. It was professional. It was utterly ruthless. Graham Gooch, the old England skipper, he laid the platform with a really tough 84. But the main man, the star of the show, was Sachin Tendulkar. His 108 was just a masterclass in controlled aggression, pure elegance, perfect timing. He just systematically dismantled the opposition.
And right here, This is where you see the fundamental difference between the two sides. Where Smith's 100 was a solo masterpiece, Tendulkar's was the centerpiece of a complete team performance. He had Gooch's 84 for support, Andy Flower's composed 68 from the middle order, everyone chipped in. It was such a stark contrast to Ryuk's one-man band.
So, the number that really matters is this one, 157. That is the first innings lead. Now, in Test cricket, that is an absolutely monumental advantage. On a pitch that's starting to wear down, with footmarks appearing for a leg spinner like Shane Warne to aim at, a lead of that size is practically a guarantee of victory. The pressure was now completely and utterly back on Ryuk.
They were eventually all out for 446. A truly dominant display with the bat, built on solid partnerships and big contributions right down the order. They hadn't just gotten ahead in the game, they'd built a fortress, an unassailable position to dictate the rest of the match. Ryuk were well and truly on the ropes.
Right, so day 3 rolls around. Ryuk are trailing by 157 runs, and they are desperate for something special. But it's just a horror show, a complete repeat of the first innings. Sehwag, Hayden, and Viv Richards all go cheaply again. There's 68 for 3, and the match is heading towards a very, very quick finish. But Steve Smith, well, he wasn't done just yet. He was ready for another fight.
And his second innings 100 was, for my money, even more impressive than his first. 124 runs, it was slower, more gritty, but this time he was batting with a massive psychological weight of knowing defeat was inevitable. You could just see the determination edged on his face. He knew his team needed a miracle, and you know what? He very nearly gave them one.
And that's what made it so incredible. He had these small partnerships with Jadeja and Botham, but he was basically batting on his own. Every partner who came in knew they were just playing for time, just trying to restore a bit of pride. The match was just slipping away, even with his heroics. It was just a lonely, defiant vigil at the crease.
And all the while, you've got Shane Warne weaving his magic from the other end. He was magnificent, turning the ball a mile out of the rough. But it was only fitting that Malcolm Marshall came back to finally knock over Smith's stumps. And as he walked off, the entire Lord's crowd, to a man, woman, and child, rose as one. A massive standing ovation for a true warrior. 236 runs in the match, and still somehow on the losing side.
So, after some classic English rain overnight, day 4 begins late. The covers are on, play is delayed, and when it finally gets going in the afternoon, Terminator need 178 to win. Now, on paper, that should be a bit tricky. Moisture in the pitch, the ball's likely to nip around. David Warner went early, which gave Ryuk a tiny glimmer of hope. But that's where the wobble stopped. After Gooch fell, Jacques Kallis and Sachin Tendulkar came together. And they were just a picture of calm and composure, knocking off the remaining runs with almost, disdainful ease. Kallis finished 54 not out, Tendulkar 42 not out. It was professional, it was clinical, and it was almost a bit anticlimactic after the incredible drama of Smith's innings.
It took them just 32.4 overs, an 8-wicket victory, a comprehensive result that, despite the smallish target, perfectly hammered home the central theme of this whole contest, the complete triumph of the collective over the individual.
So, when you really boil it down, there are 3 clear reasons why Terminator won this match so comfortably. First, winning the toss in those conditions was a massive, massive advantage, and they exploited it perfectly. Second, their incredible bowling depth meant there was just no respite, nowhere to hide for the batsmen. And third, their batting depth was just on another level. 6 different batsmen scored over 40 runs in the match. That right there is the difference between a good team and a great one.
Ryuk had one bloke, Steve Smith, scoring the lion's share of the runs. When he succeeded, they only just competed. Terminator, on the other hand, had contributions from everyone. Tendulkar top-scored with 150 for the match, but look at the support he had. Gooch with 131, Flower with 68, Kallis with 54. That's team batting versus individual brilliance. And in Test cricket, the team almost always comes out on top.
And the bowling numbers tell exactly the same story. Just look at that attack. You have Marshall's raw pace and aggression. He gets you 7 wickets. You have Akram's mastery of swing and reverse swing. He gets you 5 wickets. Then you bring on Warren's bamboozling leg spin, and he takes 5 wickets. There was just no escape. It was a relentless, multi-pronged machine that simply wore the opposition down.
This match really does capture the unique beauty of Test cricket, doesn't it? Steve Smith played 2 of the great Lord's innings against an all-time great bowling attack. In just about any other sport in the world, an individual performance like that guarantees you victory. In Test cricket, it guarantees you applause, respect, a standing ovation, but it doesn't guarantee you the win. It's a beautiful, tragic paradox, really.
Terminator won this match by a commanding 8 wickets, but history will always, always remember it for Steve Smith's defiance. And that's the final, beautiful irony of this game. Sometimes in defeat, you find immortality, and sometimes in victory, you're just a footnote in someone else's story. 236 runs, 2 centuries, one man against the world. That, right there, is the magic of Test cricket.